Welcome, my friends, to the darkest corners. Today's tales are trips from hell. Enjoy.
The haunted 18-hour flight. It was supposed to be the longest, most exhausting flight of my life, an 18-hour haul across the ocean from New York to Singapore. I had booked the ticket months in advance, chasing a job opportunity that felt too good to pass up. I wasn't afraid of flying, but the thought of being trapped in a metal tube for nearly a full day made my skin crawl. The plane boarded late at night, and the cabin lights dimmed to a sleepy amber glow. Most passengers carried neck pillows and headphones, preparing to zone out for as long as possible. I took my seat near the back, in row 43, next to the window. The middle seat beside me was empty, a rare blessing. The aisle seat was occupied by a man in his late 60s. His skin was pale, almost gray, and his hands trembled as he folded them in his lap. He didn't look at me, didn't speak, just stared at the seat in front of him as if something terrible waited there. The engines roared, the cabin rattled, and soon we were above the clouds, swallowed by the night sky. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the occasional cough, the clink of ice in plastic cups, and the low drone of jet engines. It must have been 4 or 5 hours into the flight when I noticed something strange. The middle seat, the empty one, was no longer empty. I don't mean someone sat down quietly while I dozed. No, this was different. I blinked awake and saw a figure there, a woman with long, dark hair covering her face. She wore an old-fashioned dress, the kind you'd expect to see in a black and white photo. I thought maybe she was a passenger returning from the restroom, but I never saw her board. Her seat hadn't been occupied at takeoff. I glanced at the old man on the aisle. His eyes were shut tight, his lips moving in what looked like silent prayer. When I turned back, the woman was gone. I told myself it was fatigue, maybe my brain conjuring things in the half-sleep haze of a red-eye flight. But when I closed my eyes again, I heard something. A faint whisper. It came from the empty seat. At first, it was just the sound of air passing through teeth, a breath shaped into words too faint to catch. But then, clear as day, I heard, "Don't look out the window." My blood ran cold. I sat frozen, staring at the seat back in front of me. Slowly, against every ounce of instinct, I turned toward the window. And I wished I hadn't. Pressed against the glass was a face. It wasn't human. Its eyes were too wide, its mouth stretched too long, filled with too many teeth. Its skin was pale and pressed flat, as though something on the outside of the plane clung to us, riding the air at 30,000 feet. The face shifted, dragging itself across the window, leaving a streak of condensation as though it were breathing against the glass. I snapped my eyes shut. My heart thudded so loud I swore it would wake everyone around me. When I dared to look again, the window was clear. But the seat beside me wasn't empty anymore. The woman had returned. Her hair draped forward, hiding her face, but I could feel her watching me from behind it. The air grew colder, and the overhead light above her flickered. I leaned into the aisle, shaking the old man awake. "Do you see her? Please, tell me you see her." He didn't look at her. He didn't even raise his head. He just muttered, "Ignore them. Don't answer. That's how they get in." My stomach turned, them, plural. I tried to move, to call for a flight attendant, but the seatbelt tightened across my lap as though invisible hands pulled it snug. I could hardly breathe. Then, one by one, the overhead screens flickered to life. The safety demonstration replayed, but it was wrong, twisted. The smiling flight attendants on screen had hollow eyes, their movements jerky, their grins too wide. And behind them, in every shot, were shadowy passengers staring directly into the camera. I yanked at my seatbelt, heart pounding. No one else stirred. Everyone was asleep, too still, unnaturally still, as though the entire cabin had fallen into some trance. The whisper returned, right against my ear now. "Look outside again." I refused. I buried my face in my hands, praying for the flight to end. Hours blurred together. I must have blacked out from sheer terror, because when I opened my eyes again, the cabin was filled with daylight. The passengers were awake, chattering quietly, as though nothing had happened. Flight attendants rolled carts down the aisle, offering breakfast. The middle seat was empty. The old man beside me was gone. I flagged down a flight attendant and asked about him, about the passenger in 43C. She frowned, checked her manifest, and shook her head. There was no one assigned to that seat. I insisted there had been a man, pale, trembling, whispering prayers. She only smiled politely and moved on. I thought maybe it was over, maybe my mind had played cruel tricks on me. But when the plane touched down in Singapore, I noticed something on the window beside my seat. A streak. Fogged glass, shaped like the outline of a face. And when I grabbed my bag from under the seat, I found something tucked into the pocket of the middle chair. A boarding pass, seat 43B, name, passenger unknown, status, deceased, the Caribbean Curse. I'd never been on a cruise before. The idea always felt unnatural. Trapping thousands of strangers on a floating hotel in the middle of nowhere didn't scream vacation to me. But when my best friend Melissa begged me to join her on a week-long Caribbean getaway, I caved. Sun, sand, and endless buffets sounded harmless enough. The ship itself was massive, gleaming white, with polished decks and pools that seemed to stretch forever. Families laughed, couples posed for photos, and the air carried the tang of salt and sunscreen. It all felt like a dream. But dreams rot quickly. On the second night, after dinner, Melissa and I wandered to the upper deck. The ocean stretched black in every direction, moonlight glinting off its restless surface. A live band played near the pool, and the crowd swayed lazily to the music. That's when I noticed her. A woman standing at the railing, staring into the water. Her dress was tattered, her hair stringy and wet, dripping onto the deck. I thought maybe she'd come from the pool, but her skin was pale, far too pale. She turned, and for just a moment, her eyes locked on mine. They were clouded, milky, like the eyes of someone long dead. I gasped, but when I blinked, she was gone. Melissa didn't see her. No one did. Everyone kept drinking, dancing, laughing like nothing was wrong. That night I dreamed of water rushing into my cabin, flooding the sheets, dragging me under. I woke gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, the sound of rushing water still echoing in my ears. On day 3, whispers spread among the passengers. A man had vanished. Room 927, empty. No one saw him leave. No record of him disembarking at the last port. His belongings were still in his cabin. Security brushed it off, said he probably wandered drunk and passed out somewhere. But the crew's faces told a different story. They were pale, nervous, whispering in languages I didn't understand. That evening, Melissa convinced me to join her for a midnight walk on the deck. The ship was quieter then, the party atmosphere drowned by the endless sound of waves. Halfway down the darkened walkway, we saw it. Wet footprints, bare feet, leading along the deck, glistening as though freshly made. They trailed off toward the stern, where the railing stood high above the churning black sea. The footprints ended at the edge. Melissa grabbed my arm. Someone jumped. But when I looked down, the water didn't ripple like it should have. Instead, pale hands reached up from the depths, hundreds of them, pressing against the hull of the ship, dragging their nails across the metal. And for a heartbeat, I saw faces in the water. Gaunt, hollow-eyed, their mouths open in silent screams. We bolted back to our cabin. I begged Melissa to leave with me at the next port, but she refused. "You're letting it get in your head," she said. "It's just the ocean. It plays tricks." On the 5th night, another passenger went missing. Then another. No announcements were made, but the tension was unmistakable. The hallways grew quieter. Smiles looked forced. Crew members avoided eye contact. I couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m., I stepped out of our cabin, heart hammering. The halls smelled damp, like seawater had seeped into the carpet. That's when I heard it, sobbing. A woman's voice. I followed the sound to the end of the corridor where a crew-only door stood slightly ajar. Beyond it was a staircase leading down into darkness. The crying grew louder, echoing through the metal walls. I should have turned back, but I didn't. The stairs led me deep below the passenger decks, where the air grew colder, wetter. Pipes hissed, water dripped, and the floor felt slick beneath my shoes. At the bottom, I found a locked gate. Behind it, knee-deep in seawater, stood the same woman I'd seen on the second night. Her pale eyes fixed on me. Her lips peeled back, revealing a mouth impossibly wide. And then, in a chorus that wasn't hers alone, I heard voices, dozens, maybe hundreds, rising from the flooded chamber. "Join us." I stumbled back, racing up the stairs, the sound of rushing water chasing me. When I burst back into the corridor, everything was dry. Silent. The next morning, Melissa was gone. Her suitcase, her clothes, even her shoes, still in the cabin. But she wasn't. The staff told me she'd probably joined an excursion early, but I knew better. By the time the ship docked at the final port, nearly a dozen passengers had vanished. Officially, no announcements were ever made. People disembarked with their tans and souvenirs, smiling for photographs. But I couldn't smile. Because when I looked back at the ship, I saw them. Dozens of pale figures lined the railing, dripping seawater onto the deck. Their eyes fixed on me, mouths open in silent screams. And in the center, I saw Melissa. Her eyes were cloudy, her hair wet, her dress clinging to her body as though she'd just been pulled from the depths. The ship sailed away, taking her with it. And I know, somewhere beneath the waves, the dead are waiting for their next cruise.